Hello, Deep Dive Sports listeners. How are you doing today? Welcome
Hello,
to the first
and
episode
welcome to the very first
of
episode
Behind
of
the
David
Scenes.
What's going on, ladies and gentlemen?
Presented by Deep Dive
Sports
today.
What up, everybody? Welcome to the first
It's
ever
called Our
episode
Lights
of
All right, guys,
Behind
welcome.
the Scenes, presented by
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of On the Pitch, presented by Deep
What's going on,
Dive.
ladies and gentlemen?
I'm your
Deep
host,
Dive
Dom,
Sports
and I'm joined with Chase.
We are starting off with a bang.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of On the Pitch, presented by Deep Dive Sports.
All right, hello,
Presented by Sports.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of On the Pitch.
Hey, how's it going, everyone?
Hello, everyone. Dom here, and welcome back to another episode of Sports Through the Looking Glass. Today, I'm going to be joined by David, and we're going to discuss the early 2000s phenomena that was the one and only slam ball. David was going to get things started with some of the history of the game, then I'll go over some of the rules, and then we'll finish up with some final thoughts. Be a nice little quick and easy episode, but going to be jam-packed with a lot of information, so I hope you guys are ready to learn a lot today. David, let's throw it to you first.
Since Slam Ball aired only 20 years ago, roughly, in 2002, and only lasted for 2 to 3 years, roughly, there's not much history to cover. The sport was first thought of in 1999 by Mason Gordon and Mike Tollin while they were at the Tollin and Robbins Productions in Hollywood. There are stories that the idea for the sport came from a video game similar to NBA Jam. In the most stereotypical way, they came up with the sport and drew it out on a napkin. What they needed for this napkin dream to come true, first, knowing that at the time there were many sports being created and being tested, and they needed one successful Hail Mary, which was a broadcasting deal. Second, they needed a special court to be created, which would later become popular as a trampoline park. Gordon and Tollin would get that opportunity in 2002 when Slam Ball aired on what would become Spike TV. Between the sports highlight reel action and aerial athleticism, the sport actually took off to a degree. The sport grew very fast due to them being on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, got coverage from the New York Times and SportsCenter, just to name a few. It got so big that millions were tuning in each week. However, things would not last that long because Slam Ball would only air on Spike for 2 years. And the main purpose for this change was because, as Gordon would put it, Spike wanted to take the sport in multiple different directions that they did not feel comfortable with making. For example, Spike wanted to make it more like the WWE and the Globetrotters. And now back to Dom with the rules.
So it's kind of unfortunate that it only lasted for a couple of years. I definitely wanted to see what it could have become because I really enjoyed watching this. Kind of remember watching a few games, when I was a kid. And it was just so fun to watch. So it's unfortunate that it didn't last too long. But the rules, as you can imagine, it's very similar to basketball. It's kind of based on basketball. However, there are some major differences. As David too alluded to first, it's played on a trampoline park. The game was also played as a full contact sport. So, David, I'm sure you've seen a lot of highlights, but it honestly seemed like a lot of these hits that looked like they were playing football and not basketball.
Yeah, I watched a few highlights before this just to get an idea of what the sport was about. Because honestly, I hadn't really heard of it before you mentioned it a while back.
Man, you missed out in the early 2000s there.
The thing is, I watched Spike TV too. And the fact that I didn't hear about this and I watched Spike TV, well, granted, I only watched one show, but that was much later.
Yeah, so. Man, you missed out. Okay, so these weren't the only differences between slam ball and basketball. The game was also played with 4 players on each team. However, there were only 3 positions. So the first is stopper, which was the defensive player. Their primary focus, as you can imagine, was to stop the opposition from scoring. The stopper was rarely seen on offense because of the rapid nature of the game, and any attacking team needed to defend their own net with, in a couple seconds. All those big hits that you've seen on the highlights, that was the stopper. stopping a dude from dunking the ball.
Yeah.
Next, you got the handler, which is effectively a midfield player and is the main ball handler. So pretty much the point guard. They move the ball from defense to attack and organizing attacking opportunities, but the handlers will also come back on defense too. And then the third and final position is the gunner. The gunner, that's all they do is attack. That's their whole job. That's what they do. So they just dunk the ball, and when they were on defense, they just stayed on the other side of the court and got some easy dunks and didn't really have to worry about playing defense too much. Furthermore, teams were free to use their players in any combination of these three positions, such as they can have one gunner and two handlers and one stopper, or two stoppers, one handler, one gunner, whatever combination you can come up with for your team. In terms of equipment, there was no special equipment required apart from just wearing your uniform. However, there was some optional stuff that you could wear, like knee pads, elbow pads. Some players even wore helmets because trampolines are flying all over the place. You don't know what you're going to hit your head on. Some people were probably smart and wore a helmet. So the floor itself consisted of a sprung floor with 4 trampolines that are set into the floor at each end. And the size of the court was required to be the same size as a regulation basketball court. But it also had to be surrounded by plexiglass. So imagine a basketball court surrounded by a hockey rink. This way, no one flew off the trampoline and broke anything. In terms of scoring is a little bit different than traditional basketball. Obviously, it's done by placing the ball through the opposing team's net, and different shots are scored differently, with more points being given to more difficult and more spectacular scores. So a team would get 2 points if the ball is thrown through the hoop without an opposition player touching it. So 3 points were given to slam dunks and all shots outside of the 3-point arc. So the winner of the game, obviously, is the team that scored the most points at the end of the match. If both teams finished the game on the same number of points, then they would go into a series of face-offs, which were played with the team scoring the most points in the end being declared the winner, clearly like any other overtime situation. Face-offs were effectively one-on-one basketball with one player defending the basket and the other one attempting to score. And then they just kept going until someone won. It's kind of an interesting way to go about a overtime system, just some one-on-one basketball.
Soccer's kind of the same thing where it's you and the goalie, essentially, when you think about it.
Yeah,
Obviously
if it goes to penalty kicks, yeah.
Or similar in hockey where if you go to penalty shots as well, it's you and the goalie. I won't say it's exactly the same, but the basic concept is there.
Right. So, David, what are your thoughts on slam ball now that we've kind of gone over the history and some of the rules?
I think that it was both perfect and not so perfect in the sense that perfect timing.
Right.
It's like it was perfect for the time that it did it. However, if they had done if it came out later when YouTube was out, I think it would have exploded everywhere.
Oh yeah. I agree with that.
Because I watched a few highlights before recording today, and it's like that was amazing, and it was hysterical at the same time. It's like you were impressed with how simple of shots that in an ordinary game of basketball would not happen.
Yep.
Like I remember watching a highlight clip, and a guy actually scored from his back because he went up, missed the original shot, came down on the trampoline, hit the trampoline on his back. He went back up and shot it and made the shot.
Some of the shots and dunks that people are able to make in this sport is just amazing.
Bonkers. It was both perfect timing when they did it because it brought the attention to the sport, but also not perfect timing in the sense that they could have gotten so many more years out of it and so many more sponsorships for it.
Yeah.
Because I remember reading they wanted to make it a legitimate sport.
Mm-hmm.
They honest to God believed that it was a legitimate sport, and they probably could have done that if YouTube was around.
Yeah.
Or Twitch.
It also kind of sounds like Spike kind of wanted to fiddle with the league more than what the original creators wanted the game to be messed with.
Yeah.
So I mean, I kind of get them. I understand why they kind of stopped it, because if it would have turned into the WWE, well, then I feel like people just would have lost interest in it. If they wanted to watch WWE, then just go watch WWE.
they would have watched WWE
Right.
because that's more popular than Slam Ball, which started in 2002.
Right. So if Slam Ball was, let's say, someone decides to start back up a Slam Ball league, do you think it would be as popular as it was? Not as popular? Maybe more popular?
Starting out, no. I think that it would take a good 3 years or so.
Okay.
I think that it would take time because it already had its start and it had its rise in popularity, but also at the same time created this neat early 2000s niche, kind of like skateboarding did.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm kind of torn on if I think it could be popular. I think instead of going to like ESPN or whatever, you'd have to go to like Twitch or YouTube, probably YouTube.
Yeah.
But I think, people our age that, remember watching a little bit, or definitely people older that probably remember that time a little bit more than we do. I feel like that generation would be very interested in it. But putting it up on YouTube, it's going to give it more accessibility for younger people that have never heard of Slam Ball before.
Because that's where most of them hang out anyways.
Right.
Because they get their gaming content from there. Mr. Beast is on there, stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like you can put any sport on a trampoline and people are going to think it's going to be kind of interesting to watch. So
yeah,
I feel like people are always going to be, at least at first, relatively interested to check it out. And then, obviously, if the product's good, people are going to keep coming back to watch it. But
yeah, I think that it could. I just think it would take some time.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. This is a sport that I really wish would have stuck around because, I mean, it was already popular. I mean, like you said earlier, there a couple million people were tuning in each week to watch Slam Ball, and that was in 2002.
Yeah.
If Spike would have kind of kept their nose out of the game and didn't want to mess with it, I feel like it really could have exploded.
Yeah, because literally Spike TV died in 2013.
Yeah. I don't think it would have been considered one of the top 5 sports, but I think it definitely would have been.
Of course not.
It definitely would have been more mainstream. You might find a game here and there on ESPN2 or something, but I really wish it would have stuck around because going back and watching some of the highlights, man, it's some of the greatest sports highlights that I've ever seen. It's funny and
especially
just, athleticism is just amazing.
Yeah, because that was such an American sport, I guess you could put it.
Right.
Because it mixed two of the sports that America loves.
Mm-hmm.
That being football, American football, and basketball. And they randomly threw in trampolines for whatever reason.
Yeah, trampolines always make anything better. So
exactly.
Well, want to thank you, David, for coming onto the show tonight. I had a good time recording this. I think it was a pretty good discussion. So yeah, want to thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Sports Through the Looking Glass. As always, we are Deep Dive Sports, and we'll catch you in the next one.